My guest today is Chris Lehman. He is a writer from the Boston area. I'll put his handle up there, at Lehman Brother 42 on X. Right. Excellent. So I got that right. And Chris, welcome back to normal.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jeff. Great to be here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to have you on. Well, okay. Let me say, first of all, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. I discovered you. I don't know how long you've been around. You could have been writing in Boston for a long time. You wrote a phenomenal piece about Michelle Wu and her mayoral run or mayoral administration.
Tenure, yeah.
And yeah, tenure, that's a good word. So leave it to the writer to have a good word. And I was like, oh, wow, this is great. I gotta have this. I gotta have you on. And it has been fantastic. I think that, first of all, I guess start with the basics. What's PirateWire and where did it come from? Because this article that you wrote, and we'll get into that in a second, but this article was on PirateWire, which there was an article before, which I have showed up, which I want to get into a little bit too, but it came out of nowhere to me.
Yeah.
And I like, this is great. So I subscribed immediately because I wanted to read your piece, and I like long form journalism. The PirateWire, is it PirateWires?
Wires within
PirateWires. Yeah. Okay, PirateWires.com. I'll put the links up in a second. Talk to me about PirateWires.
Yeah, absolutely. So PirateWires is a project that actually started with the personal Substack of Mike Solana, who's a really interesting guy. I think he got his start in the seasteading world, if you're familiar with that, building cities out in the ocean, and then moved
Did that work? Wait, hang on. Sorry. Building city. I haven't heard of that because I don't know of any cities out in the ocean.
Yeah,
so
yeah, I mean,
it didn't...
Well, I don't think any of them have hit a critical mass, but there's a lot of individual people or small groups of people who have made their own small settlements. This was a project that was led by a guy named Patri Friedman, who's actually Milton Friedman, the economist's grandson.
Really?
Yeah. And
okay.
So, it's an idea that's gotten a lot of support from, interesting, smart people who have been willing to fund it. It hasn't gone super far yet, but, basically the idea is start anew, don't have to follow an existing set of laws, blank slate, create your own society because you're in international law.
Like somebody took the Ayn Rand novel real seriously.
Yeah, pretty much. Or BioShock if you've played that video game.
I quit video games in college right after college. Brief segue. For all you youngsters out there, learn this lesson from your old pal, Jeff. I was 22. And this is back in the late 90s, and GoldenEye was out, right?
Yep, for sure.
And N64 GoldenEye, great game. And I graduated from college, moved to Boston, living in the big city, had a job, had some money, went to Kmart, back when they had Kmart over in the South Bay Center, bought a console and bought GoldenEye. Yeah. And that night, I stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning, and I had this moment of clarity where I was like, I'm 22 years old, I'm living in the best city in the world, it's 3 a.m. and I'm playing fucking GoldenEye.
Yeah.
I packed it up, put it away, had my receipt, returned it to Kmart, and I've never played a video game since. It was like a cold turkey moment. I was just like, but to your point, BioShock, City, Ayn Rand, we're there.
Exactly.
It's back to PirateWires.
But yeah, so anyway, Mike Solana, has been at Founders Fund, the venture capital firm for a while. He's their chief marketing officer. In the early COVID period, he started this blog, or at least that was when I first found it, early COVID era, PirateWires, to talk about tech, politics, society, all kinds of themes, and it's just grown into a fully standalone magazine. It actually still runs off of Substack, but it's styled as its own standalone site, kind of like the Free Press with Barry Weiss.
Yeah, no, I love the styling. It's great.
Yeah,
I'll put it up here. Let me put this on for the viewers at home. This is very slick. The iconic now photo of Sydney Sweeney in that GQ interview, inside the Sydney Sweeney GQ interview from hell. Which is now going to become this whole meme with the interviewer and her. But yeah, it looks great. Great articles. And I first came across PirateWires when I call it fate with this article right here, the Heather Cox Richardson revisionist history.
Yeah,
I reserve the word hate for very few people in the world.
Yeah.
I never hated Joe Biden. I never hated Barack Obama. I never, they pissed me off for sure, obvious reasons. You're on a political podcast, but I kind of hate Heather Cox Richardson because she's very smart and she knows exactly what she's doing and she's lying and she's bilking her audience. And when this article came out, I didn't sign up for PirateWires at that point. I signed up after yours, so kudos to you. But nobody had ever. A few people had attempted to, but a very good in-depth article like this. Let me put it, like this, just picking apart all her nonsense and really taking the time,
very rigorous,
to explain to the reader why she's wrong and what she's doing and why it's wrong. So I appreciated that. I was like, okay, I'll have to back in my head. And then like a week or two later, yours came out.
Yeah. Yeah, the Heather Cox Richardson one was a good piece, right? It's not just, you might disagree with Heather Cox Richardson on the, issues substantively, but then there's a whole separate level of, the audience capture and the feeding them the most negative possible take on the current situation. I mean, I have at least one relative who's on the older side who subscribes to the blog and just has a totally warped view of what the political situation is. And it's bad for people.
I think there's a lot of people out there that could raise their hand and know that exact same thing, and usually largely female, largely boomer audience that she tells day in and day out that the sky is falling. We are underneath in an authoritarian regime, objectively untrue.
Yeah,
these are policies they don't like, and if you're a liberal Democrat, okay, you're not going to like a Republican's policies, okay, but authoritarian is foolish. And excuse me, I'm drinking seltzer. But what would really bother me about her in this piece, which it didn't get too into this much, because I've actually done read her newsletter, and when she gets into post office conspiracies, which is, I'm not kidding here. I read this. She thought there was a post office conspiracy back in 2020 that Trump was going to commandeer the post office to confiscate mail, and confiscate mail-in ballots and steal the election. 2020 didn't work out that way, obviously, and put that aside for a second. Then even crazier things in the years since then, where when Trump would wear a gold tie, it was a subliminal signal to the Proud Boys that he was supporting them. I'm not kidding. I read that this is wild. Right. Oh boy, she's got something loose. So I know she's smart enough to know what she's saying is objectively untrue. So when that gets frustrating when you see an academic and she's in hell. And what's really frustrating, this is why I don't like her. It's like Noam Chomsky. They're held in such high esteem. Mm-hmm. Like politicians are politicians. People, don't believe them 90% of the time. And there's a religiosity to too many politicians. But her, it's like people were showing up at that No Kings protest with, I'll believe it when Heather Cox Richardson says it. It's those signs. Right. I was like, oh my God, it hurt my head. So PirateWires doing that, or who wrote this piece? Blake Dodge and Catherine D. I mean, fantastic work. And stuff like this needs to come out. There needs to be an intellectual counterweight, a deep dive, an expansive a place for journalists to have this. And kudos to Mike Solana. He actually, if you sign up for PirateWires, I don't know if he does this for everybody, he emailed me thanking me for signing up. I was like, that's cool. I thought it was auto-generated. He's like, no, it's me.
Yeah, no.
I was like, that's cool. That's very cool.
Mike's a great guy. I've met him a few times, and he's super smart, really nice guy, and really cares about what he's doing. He's a good guy to talk to about this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So what about you? Before we get into your article, what about you? Did you grow up around here?
I did, yeah. I grew up in Lexington, went to college in the area. I've spent most of my life here, briefly in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Chicago, but most of my life here.
Yeah, so safe to say you like it here.
I do, yeah. No, I mean, it's a great area. Family, friends in the area, obviously a great place to be a young person making your career, right? Plenty of great industries. So I started my current company, Groma, with a few of my friends in Boston in 2020, 2021, and have been building it since then. It's a great place to invest. Obviously there are some people who are trying to make it a worse place to invest, and that's a lot of what my article's about.
We'll get into that in a second.
But the institutions we have here are phenomenal. The human capital is incredible. And obviously, it's also just a gorgeous historic state with a lot of fun stuff to do.
It is. It's a great place to live. I mean, it's why I'm doing this. It's why I get involved with what I get involved with. I want to keep it a nice place to live.
Yeah.
A good place to live. A place you want to stay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's becoming tougher and tougher with just basic mundane liberal policies. You know, I mean, we're not. You could get into the sky is falling and the Mamdanis, and maybe we'll talk about that as we talk about Mayor Wu, but I think just the lazy liberalism that we see in state government, local government, is causing life to be harder. What's your company? What does it do?
So my company is called Groma. It's a real estate and fintech company, and I usually characterize it as having two sides. One side is a vertically integrated real estate company. So we raise money, we use it to acquire properties, upgrade them, renovate them, and then manage them for the long run. And so we specifically focus on the small multifamily asset class, so 2 to 20 unit buildings. Most of that is the classic Boston triple decker. And it's an asset class that really has been not efficient to run historically. Most of the operators are, mom and pop operators who have
single family.
Exactly. One or two properties. They're putting a lot of their own time and energy into it, so that decreases the actual cost of management. But that's not an approach that scales. And so institutions have not yet figured out a way to invest in it. My team and a bunch of my co-founders and the other senior team members came from Grubhub, and so have experience making software systems and operational processes that help do that kind of last mile logistics more efficiently. And so we've been building that ecosystem up. We have about 120 properties at this point, and have been producing good returns for investors, good experiences for the tenants. That's one side of the business. The separate side is the financial side, where we're developing a bunch of different financial tools to make it easier for more people, and especially people who aren't traditionally investors, to invest in real estate. Part of that's
it's like fractional.
Yeah, so fractional ownership, right? REITs, real estate investment trusts, which is not itself innovative, but the things that we're doing to make it even more accessible. We're working on tokenization, which we expect to have live in January, and there's all kinds of apps in the on-chain space that you can plug real estate into and generate extra yield out of it, which makes it a more appealing investment. And then we're also going to be launching a tool probably mid next year that we call rent vesting, that allows renters to turn their rent payments directly into ownership of the REIT.
Okay. All right. So a little bit of building equity.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So let people talk about that.
And there's a big social mission here too, right? And I talk about this, I think, a little bit in the PirateWires piece, and also in one that I wrote earlier this year for American Affairs, which is a more academic publication. And, renters often vote for policies that aren't great for the long-term future of the cities they live in.
All right, so let's I think that's a good segue. Well, good luck. It sounds like we need more on that entrepreneurial spirit.
Thanks.
Here. I mean, kudos to you for taking that risk and doing it. And it sounds like it's obviously a good business to get into that needs efficiencies for sure. Yep. So the piece by Mayor Wu, or not by Mayor Wu, from about Mayor Wu. Excuse me. Is Boston cooked? I like this. The Mayor Wu is running a 100-year-old playbook, choking housing development and fueling crime to please her base at the expense of the city's future. So you're directly impacted this for your business. So, but you're also a writer. So, you put these skills to use. Where it starts off, where it got me, all right, so there's two aspects to this, right? There's what Mayor Wu's performance, and then the historical parallels to James Michael Curley, right? That's the figure from 100 years ago, and how he basically developed this city machine. And they're talking about old timey, way back in New York City, Tammany Hall, the city machine politics, and Mayor Wu is, I think, running that playbook. It's unsurprising. It sounds, when you talk to normal people, and I mean normal people that live in the suburbs, I guess, basically, or maybe are complainers in the city, but like the lifestyle of the city, they go, how can people continue to vote for her? And we're seeing it with Mamdani, and when you tell people what they want to hear, but never follow through with it, and their quality of life diminishes, I guess that goes a long way. So what inspired you to write this piece, and what kicked it off?
Yeah, so I mean, it was, as you're noting, right, frustration in operating in the city, being based in the city, both for our office and then most of the actual properties that we hold in our portfolio. and looking both at the policies that come down that affect existing properties, and then especially on the development side, which is not really what we do as much, right? We're not doing a lot of ground up development. We're more upgrading, renovating existing units, but we have lots of friends who are in development and who.
So it is a slightly easier for you because it's an existing property?
It is, yeah. Right. And so, the current state of Groma, my company, is non-trivially downstream of the challenges of building new buildings, especially large ones in the Boston area, right? And this is a problem that's trying to be addressed by various reforms at the state level or at the city level. But we started, we had tried to take on some bigger construction projects earlier in the company's history and kind of just ran into bureaucracy and favoritism, cronyism.
Right. Okay. So, all right, this is the thing. I was in a little bit of not a Twitter beef today, but like a slight disagreement with somebody who I like, who's done some good work in politics recently. And they're like, we need bold things, and light a fire, speak fire, and all these kinds of like platitudes. And I'm just like, hang on, man. I want 3 to 5 things we need to get rid of. Like, that's what you got to talk about. Get rid of this. This will be better. And with the city, I think it's very clear. You speak to the bureaucracy. Yeah, I'm sure. I don't want to go through the hundreds of steps that you probably have to do to transform a property, because that won't make for a good podcast. But I think what people need to realize is Boston right now whatever happens to Boston will happen to Boston, because we can't affect that right now. Josh Kraft ran a horrible campaign, ran on nothing. I mean, anything he would have challenged her on would have been attacked by the left.
Correct, yeah.
Which is she's good at the politics of that, but being scared of the left at the expense of normal people. If he had said, rent's so high because we're not building buildings because there are these mandates, these climate mandates, these low-income housing mandates, all of these mandates, new housing production has essentially ceased to exist inside Boston. That's why everything's so expensive. But he was too afraid to say that. And you need somebody who's willing to call that out in its entirety in order to move the needle.
Yeah. I mean, Josh hit on some of these things, right? He was pretty aggressive on the below market housing mandates, but he definitely could have gone further, I guess, substantively on some of these other elements, but didn't want to alienate the progressive base.
You got to risk that. Sure. You can't, like that. The progressive base will be locked. Mamdani pointed to Wu as his inspiration. So it's like you can't live in that. Oh, geez, I'm sorry, I'm belching here. We're in that world where you're trying to please the progressive left, because you will never please the progressive left. They will just keep asking for more. So this hits home to you. It affects your business, affects your livelihood, but you can also see the negative effects that take place when Wu's policies are put fully into action. And what I want you to touch on was, how did it come to you about the James Michael Curley aspect?
Yeah.
What was that? So explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So I first came across this reading a paper from about 20 years ago by a Harvard econ professor, Ed Glazer, who's really, really smart, probably the foremost economist on urban issues in the world. Has done a lot on, broader housing policy, urban policy. And he had a really good essay, I think, with Andre Schleifer, another economist, back in 2005, 2006, where he talks about the mayoralties, because there were several non-consecutive mayoralties of James Michael Curley in Boston.
Oh, right, because he went to jail and served part of his sentence as mayor.
As mayor, yeah.
Which is wild, but yeah.
Exactly. His final term was in the late 40s. He was in jail for part of that. He lost, re-election after that, and then never came back. I think it was Hines who beat him there.
Okay.
But yeah, so he was on and off mayor from the 1910s through the 1940s, and basically, Boston looked very different back then, right? It was much more of the old school rivalry between the English, the classic Boston Brahmins who had been there for hundreds of years, and the Irish who had been there much more recently, right? Coming in the 19th and early 20th century.
Yeah.
The two sides hated each other, right? Constant rivalry, all the kind of classic dynamics you'd expect of that kind of thing. And Curley really found an entrepreneurial angle as a politician there, where he was doing things to make the Irish happy, right? They were his constituency, but he also hit on this additional element of, if I do enough things to piss off the English, whether it's, neglecting repairs in their neighborhood, increasing taxes on their businesses, differentially assessing properties based on whether it was an Irish or English neighborhood, which is what Wu's doing here, not racially specifically, but messing around with assessment values.
Well, this is something I didn't, I learned something when you wrote that piece. So we know, like a year or so ago, I remember reading this, Boston, unsurprisingly, had a budget shortfall, right? Yep. Because commercial property, due to COVID, people aren't moving back into the office spaces as rapidly as they were. So commercial real estate tax is down, and it's 1/3 of the city's budget. So that being the case, a lot of the building owners applied for easements. No,
so basically, what happened is the city, releases new assessments periodically of the taxable value of buildings. But because I think Boston didn't want to take a big revenue hit, their assessments that they released of commercial properties were still unrealistically high. They went down maybe 10% when they should have gone down like 30, 40, 50%. Right. And so what happens, if you're a property owner, whether it's residential or commercial, and you get a property valuation that you think is too high from the city, you appeal it. And you lay out your methodology for why you think it should be a different.
Right. So you appeal it, and because it's too high and the taxes are too much, and it makes sense to do so from a financial perspective. And then what happened to those individuals who applied for an appeal?
Yeah. So basically, specifically for these properties that went for appeals, not the ones who didn't, who are in the same position otherwise, their valuations were basically clandestinely marked up. They ended up being higher than they were previously. And, it seemed like a pretty clear case of retaliation. And so it's still moving it through the courts. There are a few, legal nonprofits that are representing these property owners that seem to have been retaliated against by the Boston Assessing Department. But
I find it deliciously ironic that these people, the progressives that speak of authoritarianism and they speak of democracy and they give it the blow off, and in reality they're petty bureaucrats who are just as they just want power for as much as anybody else in history. And it's gross, just the retaliation of it. It's like, you're gonna appeal what I get. Oh, we're gonna make it even higher.
Right.
Like
it's not,
it's
not
crazy.
Impartial rule of law, which is what we're supposed to have, obviously.
Yeah. When in reading that was one of the things that stuck out to me that I didn't know took place, and it's shameful. If you do the math, the peak of Mayor Walsh in his administration, we were building 5,500 to 6,000 units, single-family units, or whatever units equates to that. Units a year, right? Yeah. So a good amount, right? Where they were building new at a good clip.
Yep.
Because of the mandates, which I'll scroll down to in a second on here, we're down to about 2,000. So it's about a 4,000 unit per year differential.
Right. And
the estimates in Massachusetts, what's keeping our housing stock, the price is so high, is we need about 200,000 new units. Yeah. So over 10 years, by the way.
Right.
So 4,000 times 10, 40,000 units.
Right. A fifth of the total, yeah.
Right. So about 25% of the units that we need are not being built because of Mayor Wu. She is this anvil that is dragging down the state of Massachusetts, because it doesn't just affect Boston. Yeah, sure, it's affect, but then people have to move out. So then it increases the price outward, and so on and so on. And it has this ripple effect that she thinks that she's doing the greatest thing in the world by bumping up. Well, can you get into some of the stats? I was aware of the percentage of units when it went from 13% to 20% low income.
Correct.
Right. So from 13% of the units that have of a new building have to be that low income, it went up to 20%,
Yep.
thus making it not profitable to build these things anymore. But there was another thing what did she lower? There was something that she lowered.
She lowered the threshold at which that applies, right? So I believe it used to be
Right.
10. Any new building with 10 or more units had that 13% threshold.
Right.
Now it's any building with, I think, 6 or 7 units has the 20%.
Right. So even
threshold.
an even smaller unit, you have to make
Yep.
1 or 2 or 3 low income, thus making it unprofitable.
Right.
So grinding to a halt. Construction has basically ground to a halt.
Yeah. And then there's, aside from the affordability requirements, there's the energy requirements, which, both Boston at the city level and Massachusetts at the state level already have, as you'd probably guess, some of the, most stringent environmental energy requirements in the country for building. And we've now gone and made them even more restrictive, such that I think buildings after some year, I forget the exact year, have to be net zero carbon emissions. Which
right. Well, so this is over the past week, I've seen some traffic on this. This needs to be scrapped in its entirety, the net zero. And to the guys running for governor, I know your teams are watching this. If you're not watching this, you need to get on that. That is get rid of net zero by 2050. Enough is enough. It is choking off everything, and it's impossible to meet.
It's killing construction, and I think there's a really important rhetorical angle here, especially as it relates to the current, gubernatorial campaigns, right? If you're, Keneally, short sleeve, et cetera, right, and you're trying to appeal to moderates in Massachusetts, which you have to do if you want to be governor, it's important to point out that when you stop a building being built in Boston or in Massachusetts broadly, that building still gets built. It just gets built elsewhere in the country. And statistically, it gets built in, far suburbs of Dallas or Nashville or Austin or somewhere, in Florida, right? Yeah. Places where it's going to be a lot less environmentally friendly, where people are going to have to drive their car a lot more. And so you're actually increasing national emissions by making requirements so strict in these dense urban areas.
Well, it's not even a wash, right? It's actually worse.
It is worse.
Right. So the policies here are making it worse at large.
Correct. Yeah. It's perverse.
Yeah. Well, they want to feel good. I don't think look, this is all about feelings. This is not about policy and affecting good government and what's the best outcome. It's about feelings. It's about making their progressive base feel better. It's about making themselves feel better and patting themselves on the back that they did a good job and protected Mother Earth. Meanwhile, the city falls apart. I mean, I lived in Boston for at least 10, 11 years. It's the greatest.
Yeah.
It's the best city. It's the best city. It's more walkable than New York. It's safer than New York. And it's getting worse. It's not as bad as New York, for sure, but it's getting worse. And when Menino was mayor, and even when Walsh was mayor, you felt safe walking around there. You don't feel so safe.
No, it's true. Yeah, I mean, I commute. Part of my commute is walking through, Back Bay, Beacon Hill, which is, supposed to be among the safer neighborhoods in the city. But you still see all kinds of drug use and blatant law breaking, whether it's traffic or more serious stuff. And over the past 5 years, it seems like, for a variety of reasons that we can get into, police have been less diligent about doing that, and obviously that comes.
They're not incentivized to do it. It's like if you're going to arrest somebody and then they're going to be back in 2 days, what's the point?
Exactly right. It's the DA, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're going to, exactly. You arrest someone and then they get off with a slap on the wrist. It's just not a good use of the police.
I took my daughter into the city a few weeks ago, just kind of as a trip. Her and I was like, she'd never really been to Newbury Street or in the city. We've taken her for a few things, some shows here and there. And I was like, come on, let's go. We took the dog and we just walked up and down Newbury. It was a brisk morning. It was nice. And, Newbury Street, it's Newbury Street.
Right,
it's not, you're not going to run into too many vagrants there. But then she's like, well, let's go over to where the Dick's Sporting Goods is. And I'm sure. I'm like, and I had to pause and tell her, I was like, okay, we're going about one block over, and it's not the same as when I lived around there. I was like, I need you to be a little bit more paying attention to who's around and what's going on. Right. And I hated telling her that.
Yeah,
I really did, because I never used to have to. I would, 15 years ago, I wouldn't have had to have that conversation with a kid. Yeah. And it's embarrassing, and we know it doesn't have to be this way. It can be better.
It
You know,
really
maybe
is.
that's a campaign slogan. It can be better.
And we've seen this in San Francisco over the past year, right? They elected a new mayor last year, and already, the amount of street disorder has decreased massively. I mean, they have a long way to go, but it's clear that policy does make a difference, right? You also saw this. I think it was when Xi Jinping visited California, and it was just
they
on
cleaned it
lock.
all up.
It's possible. Disorder is a choice, basically. I mean, you can look at other countries too, whether it's Japan or
Singapore.
Right, Singapore. Singapore is phenomenal. If you have the right policies in place, people will decide that it's not worth it to engage in these behaviors.
Yeah, it's without question the right thing. And what I want to emphasize here, I'll just put this up. What I want to emphasize here is that Boston will be Boston, but Boston can't live alone, right? Because we've had situations like James Michael Curley in the past, the state legislature has put a lot of restrictions on Boston, specifically with like rent control, bad policies that they want to engage in. We do have a state police, not just the Boston PDs, so Massachusetts state police can be affected. So the who we elect at state office, who we elect as governor does matter, and who we put into the legislature does matter to affect hugely. Boston. You can limit the damage. It's still going to be a lot of damage, but you can limit the damage. And let me say, I have it on good authority that the current governor, Maura Healey, and the mayor are not on the best of terms because of these types of things. Yeah. Maura Healey is smart enough to know that you need safe streets.
Yep. That
you can't screw over the businesses in Boston, that it is the economic engine of the Commonwealth. And they don't, they're not too happy with each other. And you'll notice that in the press, they're not very complimentary, nor should they be, nor do they need to be, right? So this is really important, but we need stronger, but if you enable that bad behavior at the state level and you don't be a counterweight to that bad city policy, it's going to get worse. So let's see. I want to get into the Curley play. So aside from when the good retaliation example, but what were some of the other parallels?
So we cut off on part of the early Curley period and what made him unique in the subject of this Glazer paper, right? He was doing good things for the Irish, patronage, spending lots of money, bad things for the English, taxing them more, neglecting their neighborhoods. And the purpose of this was to get the English to leave, right? If you are an English person in Boston in, say, 1930, and your taxes are going up massively and you're not getting good city services, you're like, okay, I'm going to Brookline, I'm going to Wellesley, I'm going to Lexington, I'm out of here. Right. And that leaves behind an electorate that is more favorable to Curley, right? If you go from a 50% English city to a 10% English city, it's a lot easier for someone like Curley to win elections. And so, the Glazer paper formalizes this effect and talks about places like Detroit or Zimbabwe where similar things have happened. Yeah. I literally studied with economics with Ed Glazer at Harvard, right? She was there when he wrote this paper.
So she perversely inverted it to do, wow. So this is actually, that's
it
wild.
Was not supposed to be an instruction manual.
So that's really wild to me that she's taken, there's got to be a supervillain angle to this, that like where she, used the kryptonite it would be negative to take out Superman. But wow, that's funny that she did study probably that specific thing. Well, if people are giving you a hard time and they're like, well, we're leaving. Good.
Right.
And that's what I think the parallels to Mamdani down in New York. It's like, okay, you billionaires want to leave. We hate billionaires anyway. Bye.
Going to Florida.
I'll have more control over the city.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so okay. Continue. But I remember reading that. But that is a great point to bring up. That she's not invested in keeping people in the city.
Right.
Or the types of people to come into the city, right? She wants that progressive base to grow.
Right. She wants Boston to select for the sorts of voters who are going to keep her in office, whether that's people who are, dependent on city largesse, or, it's people who are really ideologically committed to these progressive goals, right? Those are the people who are her strongest supporters. And so if you can incentivize those people to move in and people who, are not in those categories to move out, then you're locking up the mayoralty, the city council for that brand of politician.
You just get everything you want done. What for statistics wise, do you know Do you know how many, like, I've heard that the bureaucracy of what she's put in place at City Hall, did you do any research into her administration, like how much it's grown by any chance? I didn't see it in the article, but I'm just curious because I know she's not cutting the city budget, even though she should, and there's a shortfall.
Right. So I don't know the answer by head count of city employees. She has. I know the city budget over the past 3 years has increased by about 20%. Right. So 6% annualized, well above inflation on average. And this is, again, at a time when there's a revenue crisis, right? Like, this is when you should be slimming down. Menino had a similar situation back in, I think, 02, 03, when the dot-com crash happened, right? Boston tech companies were in the gutter. Massive revenue crisis, and Menino cut the budget, right?
Which is the practical Calvin Coolidge,
right?
What you do,
right?
You don't keep, the government does not generate anything. It is a parasite on it, especially with, I imagine it's just ridiculous bureaucrats and programs that don't do anything that she's funding with the extra 20% over the past 4 years.
A lot of it is, right?
Yeah.
I have this section where I, discuss a few of the instances of city employees who have, assaulted various people, including me, to be clear, personally.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Was that in the article?
It's mentioned in passing. Yeah.
What happened?
I was on my way to the garage near work. It was kind of an unusual commute for me. There was a car blocking the street.
Okay.
I honk at the car to move. No answer. Honk again. No answer. Get out. Tap on the window. Woman gets out, shoves me, starts swearing at me. I'm not going to repeat the language she used. It was a lot of racially, aggressive language.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so,
how'd you know they were a city employee though?
I found out later, because I saw, license plate lookup, et cetera, chain down that way.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, I immediately went to the police because there's a police station. I mean, after parking my car, and police didn't do anything. Because again, like, it's the sort of situation where they know the DA is not going to,
Would you like to? I'm happy to put them on blast right now. You don't have to.
No.
Okay.
I mean, there's an ongoing suit here, on the civil side, right?
Okay.
Police weren't going to criminally prosecute. But
yeah.
I mean, and this is one of like at least 10 city employees just in 2025 who have assaulted,
her hiring,
the standards are very,
is,
very low.
The talent pool is really poor at in her administration. Wow, that's crazy. I don't think the citizens of Boston are getting the most bang for their buck with their tax
really
dollars for sure, which is it's a real shame. And I mean, if times were different, or if I lived in the city, I'd maybe even take a stab at beating her, because that'd be fun. It'd be a good time. But I don't. So it's like I feel bad. And there's nobody that's stepping up that wants to do it, which is, I had on a guest for an episode that we weren't able to air for various reasons, but I was trying to stress to them that, like, the only real change is electoral change. Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a situation right now where the Attorney General won't enforce the law of the land with the state audit.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what do you do? There's nothing you can do. You
difficult.
Cannot do anything, because if they don't want to prosecute it, the only thing you can do is vote them out.
Right.
That's the only thing you can do, is vote them out. So this is like so critical when the elections have consequences. People need to wake up and realize that. So this is why I'm pleased with that we have 3 talented gentlemen that are running. But the campaigns really need to start getting specific about what they're going to do and kind of attack on all fronts, right? Not just limit it to Maura Healey. It's like you gotta counterbalance Mayor Wu,
right?
And you got to leverage that for the burbs, because they're seeing it, and nobody wants to see our city go to crap. We love it,
right?
We love going into it. We don't want to feel fear when we walking down the street.
Right. I mean, you have hundreds of thousands of people commuting to Boston every day from the suburbs, right? Their employers are there. If the employers decide to leave, that's not good for the people who live in the suburbs.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, to the degree that the state can put Boston on a tighter leash and make it a better place to operate businesses or to raise a family, it doesn't just benefit the residents of Boston. It benefits everybody, who's in Boston's economic orbit.
100%. Okay. All right. I want to get into some of the specifics, because okay. Inclusionary zoning. Arguably the most important of Mayor Wu's policies when it comes to top-line economic growth is her update to the Boston's Inclusionary Development Policy, IDP. Prior to her modification, the IDP required new housing developments with 10 or more units, right? This was 13%. So she's making this as inclusionary, and ironically, everything ground to a halt, so nobody's getting new units.
Correct, right? It's both the normal market rate units that have, stopped being produced or relatively, but also the affordable ones, right? As I've said, and I think as Josh Kraft said during the campaign, 20% of zero is zero, right? You're not helping anyone if you make it unprofitable to build.
Right. Then we get into, so this is the statistic that we did the little bit, back of the envelope math, around 6,200 in 2017 units, 2015 around 5,100, at the peak. So, but around maybe 4,500 to 5,000, still a significant number. And now we're down to 2,300 for 23 and 24. So net zero carbon zoning. All new buildings in Boston with 15 units or more, 15 units or more, that's so small, must now achieve net zero carbon emissions. This is impossible. This is going to choke everything out. This has to go. See, we elect a governor, we can get this out of the state level, but Boston can still... Are they immune to it in the sense, like, is this state or is this local?
So this specific policy was Boston going beyond the state requirements. The state sets requirements that apply statewide, and then municipalities, if they want to, can go past that, right? But Boston has its own special status. It has more latitude in some areas, less in others than the other municipalities in the state. But this is Boston going past what the state mandates.
All right, preventing 500 units of housing from being built in Boston doesn't eliminate the underlying demand for those units. Right. Yeah. All right. Boston residents job policy, right? Private developments in Boston are required to allocate at least 51% of the labor hours to Boston residents.
Right.
Oh boy. Which is, So if you live in Cambridge or Winthrop
Quincy
or Quincy, you just drive, you're not eligible for it, so you don't get the job. So it slows down the project. And they also have to pay more for Boston residents to do it. Ridiculous. Okay. Below market advantages, subsidized housing. Boston enjoy a variety of policy-driven advantages for relative profit. What's this? Can you get into this?
So this deals with the discretionary nature of a lot of approval of big construction projects, right? In most parts of Massachusetts, and even in Boston, where multifamily housing is the norm, you often need a special permit or a variance to build a big structure, right? If you want to build 10, 20 units, right, which are not massive developments by any stretch of the imagination, you need to get special permission from the zoning board. And often that also means you need to get city councilors on board. You need to get self-appointed neighborhood representatives on board, all kinds of people who can throw a wall in front of you if they're so inclined. And for a variety of reasons, the nonprofit developers or the below market developers have a much easier time of getting through those because they can often give handouts to various of these people.
Corruption.
Effectively.
Legalized corruption.
Right.
Okay. Wonderful. Below market advantages. And then the time honored favorite, rent control.
Of course. Yeah.
Well, look, this is something I think it's going to become a ballot initiative.
It seems likely. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to pull off the screen for a second, but this is going to be now a ballot initiative, right? It'll likely, and every normal person needs to be aware and not follow their feelings on this, because this is one thing. It is landlords start to neglect their properties, thus driving the property values down, thus making it a worse neighborhood that people don't want to move to, thus not moving. So it protects such a tiny percentage of people. Plus, we talk about perverse disincentives, right? It creates this upside down situation where people don't want to strive to get out of that rent control because, I've got this great 2-bedroom, in Beacon Hill or whatever.
Right.
I don't ever want to leave or build equity. And then you box other people out and it creates a nightmare. It is bad news.
It causes economies to stagnate on so many levels, right? People aren't going to move to chase a better job and get a higher income.
Correct.
Right? You're not going to go for a mortgage and become a homeowner. It causes stagnation. And the other thing, you might think, say you're a homeowner, whether you're in Boston or Arlington or Lexington, and you're saying, okay, this doesn't really affect me, right? I'm not a renter, I'm not a landlord. Why should I care? It might be nice for the renters if I vote for this. But what you're probably forgetting is if a rental property is rent controlled, its assessed value crashes, right?
Right.
You're going to decrease the size of the tax base of the city, which means that if you need to keep providing the same level of services at the municipal level, you need to raise taxes on everyone.
Right.
Right.
So the schools get worse.
Well,
the city services get worse.
Either
because
that
there's less revenue.
or they have to raise taxes on normal homeowners.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So your taxes go up when the rent control. Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. And yeah, I think, was it Mondomini down in New York wants a rent freeze,
right?
And they're flirting with it here. And if we get it on the ballot here, who's going to come out in favor of it, and as will all the progressives. And it's just a nightmare of a thing. And we have to be fighting this and educating people about all the negative consequences. And what's troubling for me is that what's behind this, and I get people's frustration with the state of the economy, with the lack of affordability. And we saw this. I keep going back to Mamdani, but he wants to seize the means of production. So that's communism. And I know he's openly a socialist, but I will happily call him and label him appropriately so, I think, a communist, if you want to seize the means of production. He didn't say this when he was 22. Mm-hmm. He said this 3 years ago.
Right.
So he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's saying. But people are lurching for this because they feel left out, right? They have massive student loans. I get it. You were told, go to college, get a degree, do it. It'll sort of work out for you, and it hasn't. And they're not making enough money to pay off the loans. They're not making enough money to start a family, to buy things. And I get it. But you have to be very wary of people that tell you, oh, it's all somebody else's fault.
Right. And
I'm just going to create this policy that's going to fix it. And you have to really not succumb to that very alluring trap that tells you, all right, yeah, rent freeze, rent control.
Right.
I'll be a low-income tenant. It's like, that's not the answer.
Right. I mean, it's the kind of thing where, it might be a, short boost to your standard of living in the short run, but it causes cities, economies to stagnate, right? Your employer might leave. There's all kinds of ways in which, it's a negative sum change, right? The gains of the people who benefit in the short run are outweighed by the costs to the whole system, and then in the long run, really no one benefits.
Well, this is my own personal opinion here on the economic situation we find ourselves in. One, we're coming off massive inflation, and that is, I know I'm blaming the Biden administration, but yeah, the I'm sorry, the Inflation Reduction Act was basically labeled that, and the Green New Deal just pumped trillions into the economy for it, and it inflated everything. So there's inflation. So that's dying down. But there's also cultural factors that nobody's thinking of in cities like Boston, where you have most of a significant portion of the population is single, not married. Mm-hmm. And they're in their late 20s, their early 30s, their late 30s. And that continues. And that's not what it was like for the boomers.
Right.
They got married at 22.
Yeah.
And so those two people occupied one unit. Now it's like the culture changed. So, and because the boomers,
household sizes are smaller.
Yeah. So the boomers told their kids, wait a little bit. And everybody took that to heart, and they waited on their families. And that's having social impacts as well. And that's for another episode. But if you just do the math, it splits it from two people cohabitating to two people occupying rental properties that are, or whatever. And then you have the fact that I did an informal poll of the houses around my neighborhood. I put it on Twitter. I counted, like, just going around left and right.
Yep.
Like 17 houses in kind of like around the corner and stuff. 17 houses. Of those 17, 4 have families with school-age children.
Yeah.
2 are families with adult grown children living at home. So that's 6.
Yeah.
The remaining 11 were all empty nesters.
Right.
Boomers, maybe a couple who were, late, early Gen X, but mostly boomers who are living in these big houses or larger houses. Just the two of them, the kids are out of the house, and they're not moving anywhere. And I'm not saying they have to move. Like, it's their property. Do what you want. But we're talking about building. It's like, once those boomers start to pass on, I think we're going to be left with like a glut of houses. If you just look at the actuarial tables, and if people continue to move, and all of a sudden you're going to have all these properties, it's like all these people are going to. So there are factors that the government can impact, and then there's just changes on us as a culture. And I think we need to just take a step back and broadly, really deeply think about all the different factors that are at play here, rather than just necessarily snapping to all the bad policy right out of the gate, which progressives tend to do. So
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, the lack of new starter housing is making the market freeze up, right? I mean, ideally, as you're noting, many of these older residents would downsize, right? You don't need a 3,000 square foot house if you're a couple in your 60s or 70s. But because, you can't move into like a nice townhouse or a condo somewhere, you're just staying where you are. And then that means that, the family of four or whatever can't move into the school district in Arlington, Lexington, or wherever else.
yeah, it's ironic that the boomers put their parents into nursing homes and sent them to Florida, and yet they're staying in the houses that they did. All right, let's continue because there's more here. Let me. I forgot about this one. So with the schools in Boston, and the scores are dropping, and now thanks to Max Page, who was a villain in Massachusetts, we don't have MCAS. Or they have
not
been
mandatory,
right?
anymore.
It's not mandatory for graduation, which that's ridiculous. You need rigorous testing standards. But okay, so equity-based admissions. Chris, get into people can read this, but explain what has happened with the schools.
I guess for those not familiar with the Boston school system, there are a lot of standard public schools, and then there's a lot of, there's three really highly selective public schools. There's Boston Latin, two Boston Latins, and then the O'Brien School of Engineering. And so those are all really competitive, all have great histories, produce great students who go on to great schools and do great things. Highly, highly selective. There are lots of qualified students who don't get into them because there are limited slots. And for, most of their history, it's been a merit thing, right? There's an exam, you look at the grades they have going into these schools. I think most of them start in 7th grade. And, it's getting the best and the brightest students out of the Boston public school system. But in the early pandemic period, they decided to make a change where instead of just looking at who has the best scores and giving the spots to those kids, they decided to base it on what neighborhood you're in. And it was transparent, and while it's a facially racially neutral policy, it was explicitly stated by the school board and other people who were making this change that it was designed to disadvantage white and Asian students in favor of Black and Hispanic students. And that's what happened. And, it's been challenged in court. It's still there. I forget exactly why it was maintained, whereas, for example, Harvard and UNC had their policies shut down at the Supreme Court level.
Well, I mean, they were shut down, but they're finding ways around it, which is what they're doing in Boston. They're just finding ways around it. They're just calling it something else, and they're still maintaining the same de facto policy, right? So, and that's really a shame, because this doesn't advantage anybody. When you do that, it
advantages some people, right? You get
at face value.
Sure.
I just don't think you're doing those students any favors if they're going into an environment where they're not going to be
qualified.
up to the task of the rigorous standards of the new school. Of course, if you just lower the standards of the school, then I guess, I remember reading that somewhere that's taking place as well.
It probably is. And there was some discourse earlier this week about UC San Diego, where there was a substantial portion of college students at UC San Diego who were unable to do, 6th grade math.
Yeah, I read that.
And it seems like it may have been the result of some of those same, admission standards changes.
Yeah. And I guess we got to, put a pretty little bow on it is Mass and Cass. Which I got to tell you, this one's about as dumb to me as the soccer stadium, because, and I've talked about the soccer stadium at length, where it's a monumentally stupid idea for a variety of reasons, and I want professional women's soccer to succeed. I'm not saying that, but it's just this stadium. But Mass and Cass, it's a relatively localized issue. It's at this intersection. There's a whole bunch of factors that make this intersection, I'll say, popular for drug use and crime. But you would think that just if you were the mayor, you were tired of hearing about it, tired of seeing it in the paper, tired of people giving you a hard time about it, you'd just go in there on a regular basis and you'd have the Boston police move people along so they didn't congregate in that one specific spot. And which is why when I read pieces in the Globe that fluff this woman like she is the second coming of Barack Obama, and it's just not there. There's the Linda Pizzuti angle with their friends and Shirley Young. There is, not financial corruption there, but this is corruption of the truth. It just bothers me that they prop her up to be some savior of Boston when it's anything to important. And she's just allowed to get away with it. And when anybody competent would just be like, clear the area. Keep it clear so I don't have to hear about it again. But she just won't do it.
Well, and it's interesting, right? I mean, they did do a big sweep of it in maybe 2023, I think.
One-off.
Right, one-off A, and then, there was a while where it was just all out in the other neighborhoods too, right? And, ultimately what you need to do is when you have these people with these, repeat disruptive behaviors, you need to actually have some accountability. And that's something that has, been refused.
Accountability. Yeah. No, it's all Trump's fault. All right. So what's next? Well, sorry. What's next? I'll tell you what's next. Everybody go to PirateWires.
For sure.
Get a subscription. Read Chris's piece in depth because this is something that it's not going to go away. We can stay on it here. As a Republican, I can keep this front and center as part of what we need to do to take back the corner office, to get some sanity, to be somebody who's vocal in calling out the bad policies of the city and maybe tamp down and maybe get some economic growth going. But it's going to be tough because when the mayor, is talking, when Trump is trying to pull criminals off the street, this is the one thing. This is months ago when they were trying to get gang members, and it's like, you're not going to come in here and bully us. It's like, they're not bullying you, lady.
Yeah,
they're trying to. It's this. Back to Heather Cox Richardson. It's this fantasy that they've built up in their head where they're in some Handmaid's Tale novel or something like that, where they're the oppressed and there are the oppressors and they're standing up righteously for it. It's nonsense. And it's dragging the entire city down. So, 4 more years of it in Boston. I don't have good news. But next year we can do something about it. We can mitigate it.
Right.
And I think that's important for the audience to understand. So I'm going to say this. We've been going almost an hour here. But, Chris, I'll put your anything you want to plug here. Go right ahead.
As Jeff said, PirateWires is a great publication. I guess another thing, one of the most exciting opportunities with my company is this rent vesting product that we'll be launching next year. So if you're curious, if you just go to rentvesting.groma.com, sign up for the wait list. If you're a renter, I should say, it's we've designed it to be a pretty renter friendly product. So we'd love to have you on board. But mostly, I guess, keep engaged with the discourse, keep engaged with politics, stay educated and try to make the state better.
Absolutely. We all need to do that. Chris, thanks for writing the piece. This has been Back to Normal. We will return in the very near future with very exciting guests that want to get Massachusetts back to a Commonwealth that we can be proud of and all want to live in. So until next time, have a good day. Bye-bye.